Hello, and welcome to the second installation of Philanthropy Exchange, where we'll be talking to effective innovators in the field of philanthropy. Today, I'm joined by Annie Hernandez from the Frida C. Fox Family Foundation, and she's especially going to tell us about their Youth Philanthropy Connect program. Welcome, Annie.
Great, thanks. Hi, Nathaniel.
So just get us started. Tell us, an outline of what's happening with the Family Foundation and why they started Youth Philanthropy Connects and how the program works.
Okay, great. So the Frida C. Fox Family Foundation is based out of Studio City, California, and our mission has always been to maximize the potential of youth and children. And so the foundation has done that in a lot of different ways over time. And it is a smaller family foundation that started with doing responsive grant making and then really found that that they were more engaged and that they were really feeling the impact of the work that they were doing by going deeper in certain areas. And so over time, we've done that in a number of different ways through some capacity building efforts, for instance, with grantees or even working in a funder collaborative around environmental education. And one of the aspects of the foundation is that they had always involved the youth of the family, really since very, very close to the beginning of the foundation. And so we call it our junior board. So when you turn 8, you get to join the junior board of the Frida C. Fox Family Foundation. And over time, as the youth became more skilled as grant makers and learning about philanthropy, they also started sharing the story of what they were doing with the broader philanthropy field. And so I was actually working for another family foundation called the Lumpkin Family Foundation out of Illinois, and was also working with their youth and engaging their youth. Actually, at age 10, they started grant making with the Lumpkin family. And as some of those 10-year-olds had continued to grow and get older, as they were teenagers, we were really looking at what was that way that we could engage them as before they became board members. So kind of thinking about that leadership succession pipeline for youth. And so, like a good program officer, I asked the youth, okay, so here are some options of who we could hear from and learn from around youth philanthropy. And the option that they chose is they wanted to learn from other youth, which isn't surprising, knowing the emphasis around peer learning, especially within our current younger generations. And so we had this wonderful learning exchange between the Lumpkin youth and the Frida C. Fox family youth in 2010. And from that, the Frida C. Fox family youth actually went back to their board and said, gosh, we want to meet more young people that are doing work in philanthropy. And out of that is a couple of years later, what we now call Youth Philanthropy Connect. So the Frida C. Fox family invited other family foundations to come together at Disneyland, which was a nice bonus to get the youth excited for coming to the conference. And it really led to this terrific experience of youth that are involved in philanthropy, and many of them initially were family members. We now have a mix of family and community-based youth philanthropy programs that come together, and the youth share their models. They learn about promising and best practices in philanthropy, and they actually make grants together, and it's been this amazing experience of youth being able to come together. And as a component of that, we also connect the adults that are supporting those youth, and that's led to further resource development to support foundations and families that are doing this work.
So it started with Family Foundation youth boards, but is it now connecting also to Community Foundation? Is that what I'm hearing? Community Foundation youth boards or other? We've talked to after-school youth philanthropy programs. So how's it broadening or interconnecting the different entry points for youth for philanthropy?
Well, that's been one of the most interesting things. So I actually made the transition from the Lumpkin Foundation to the Frida C. Fox Foundation in late 2012. And when I made that transition, what was really interesting is, we spent the first 6 months really mapping who was doing what where. And we started by looking at family foundations And what's been fascinating is that there are so many different ways that family foundations are supporting youth philanthropy work. So, you know, there are families like the Fox or the Lumpkin family, which are supporting their next generation of the foundation. But then there's foundations like the Deco Family Foundation, based out of Northern Indiana, that they actually support local community foundations to run youth advisory councils, for instance, in their area. And then we have a number of family foundations that have been involved that are actually also running programs in schools. And so what we recognized is that those had always, for the most part, been siloed. Like the work that was happening in schools was happening in schools. The work that had been happening in community foundations, which a lot of that is based on the work out of the Council of Michigan Foundations, which has been doing this work for 20+ years through community-based youth advisory councils, is what they call them. And then we have really this emerging field thinking about succession planning and next generation efforts, especially within family foundations. So we really found that there were these opportunities, if we started looking holistically around youth philanthropy, to really connect around data and impact, to connect around learning and making sure that the best resources and materials are shared, etc. So what we've been working on now is the Frida C. Fox Family Foundation has made a couple of partnership grants to support youth philanthropy and Youth Philanthropy Connect work this year. So we've been working on what does aggregation of data and impact look like in partnership with the Foundation Center. We've been looking at how do we create more resources that are kind of real-time, ready to roll with exponent philanthropy for families. And we've also been working with the National Center on Family Philanthropy to continue to develop these resources for especially family foundations, which we found probably there's been a lot of things happening in community-based youth philanthropy, there's been a lot of things happening in school-based youth philanthropy, so this was really kind of the bigger opportunity for us to help to create resources to support and share what's working.
So I'm really excited that you have a particular perch where you can see youth philanthropy emerging in these three silos, and you're looking at an opportunity to weave them together. Two questions that come from that, and you can choose your own adventure here. One is, I feel like youth philanthropy is an emerging field of practice or community of practice, and so I'm wondering how pervasive are strategic youth philanthropy programs in those three silos, and how much growth do you anticipate? So there's a sense of like, is this going to be 20, 30, 50% of foundations are going to be looking at their youth development? The other one too, and this one's perhaps a little more challenging, which is that if you're coming from a family foundation perspective, that background's going to be a lot different than school-based or community foundation-based, especially around class. Because my sense of those efforts outside of family foundations and family wealth is that they're trying to diversify the makeup of the student body and introduce people across class to philanthropy. So can you share some thoughts on those two issues?
Sure. So I really see, especially in community foundations, with the leadership of Michigan and really setting out this model for years and years, that many community foundations are thinking about, one, how to have some sort of outreach program that's specific to youth in the community, right? Now, the other side of the house within community foundations, of course, is thinking about their donors and thinking about engaging those donor families. And a lot of times those two have been very separate. So I foresee in the future really this opportunity of those being more connected. So I think we'll see things like, for instance, out of the Greater Atlanta Community Foundation, they have this Planet Philanthropy that they've run for years. It's working with donor families, but a lot of that same content could also be used in the community, working with with youth from the community. I also see that as we continue this succession planning, next generation conversations within the field of family philanthropy, there's really an opportunity, especially, well, there's really this opportunity to influence families to think about aging down that next generation conversation. And I think if we're able to provide examples and inspire through families that have really seen the benefits of engaging their youth young, I think that, and we can begin to make the case about why that matters and how that impacts their lives going forward. I really see this also as that emerging community of practice, as you talked about. So I foresee more foundations moving this direction. The other thing that I think we can really influence is just foundations, especially if they're doing work or in grant making for youth, be it through after-school programs or through education, that this is an amazing opportunity to ensure that you are engaging a youth voice in your work. And that could be your own family, that could be community youth, but the youth are in school all day, every day. They are great experts at education, as a result of that. And I also think, one of the things that we've really tried to do with Youth Philanthropy Connect, and especially at our conference, having youth that are coming from families of wealth with youth that are coming from community-based youth philanthropy programs, there's quite a balance of that now. And I think it really normalizes the experience. For many of these youth, regardless if they're community-based, they're part of a community-based program or a family philanthropy, most of them have never met other youth that are doing this kind of work. So just to normalize the experience of being involved in philanthropy first and foremost, but then also creating a respect for the diversity of those voices around philanthropy is really what we're doing. So, I guess as I look to the future of youth philanthropy and the future of philanthropy, I guess broadly, my goal is that there is more diversity of representation of who's at the table and who's making the decisions and being involved in philanthropy. And so, many of the youth that when I ask them, like, what is philanthropy? They say, oh, well, it's giving. And to them, it's very broad, and it doesn't have to look as structured, I guess, as it has in our current day. And so I really feel like by having that interface between the youth coming from different perspectives is actually a bit of our secret sauce.
That's great. So we're close to time, and I have one last question that maybe you've already answered, but before I ask you my last question, is there anything that you want to add? We could go on and on. I want to know what inspires you and challenges that you've surmounted, but I want to give you a chance to convey anything to our audience that you might like to.
Sure. Well, one of our presentations that we were making last year, Zach Witten, who's one of the Lumpkin family members and has been a part of their youth philanthropy work since he was quite young, someone asked him, well, aren't you busy with school and just with everything that comes with being a college student? And, how do you make time for youth philanthropy? And he said, I don't know any other way to be at this point. And I think my final advice would be just the value of engaging youth in these kinds of conversations and experiences. And starting young does matter. And it's never too late to start. But I think starting young matters because it really can influence the values and the experience that these youth are seeing the world through. And if they're seeing that world through a more kind of just and fair and sustainable way, I really think that's where the future of philanthropy should go.
Great. Well, that gives me my chance, and like I said, you may have already answered this, but I'm asking everyone, if you're successful, if the field is successful, how will philanthropy be different in 25 years?
Well, I'm hoping we have a lot younger people on the boards of organizations, but I also think just more people engaged in giving broadly, and that to me means a diversity of ages, a diversity of voices, and I think that there's this recognition of, we're not, it's not us as individual organizations, it's us as working together, as networks, as people that care about causes, to move those forward. And so that we aren't as stuck in our kind of organizational structures and decision making, but that's, in a much more, shared collaborative sense of how we can make a difference in the things that we all care about.
All right. Well, thank you very much for spending the time today and for all the work that you do. Good luck with your upcoming conference. Do you want to give a plug for your conference, or are you all sold out?
You can definitely come and still join us at Disneyland July 24th through the 26th. For our 4th annual Youth Philanthropy Connect conference. We'll be learning about how Do Something makes their youth campaigns. We'll be inspired by a lot of youth leaders and having a lot of fun learning around philanthropy. So we'd love to have you join. Thanks.
And folks can find that at fcfox.org/YPC, and I think there's a link to the conference there. All right, well, thank you very much, and for everyone who tuned in, thanks for joining us.